I started my presentation by evoking the problem of the accessibility of the works and the scarcity of translations in some countries. To live in a country where the international production is accessible, of course not in its entirety, but more widely than anywhere else, is a real advantage for a scholar. But there is a price for this advantage in terms of methodological requests. Confronted with an overabundant production, a continuous flow of novelties, the scholar is forced to make choices and to skip over lots of artists and works because it has become impossible to aspire to universal expertise. There are just too many comics being published in all parts of the world for a normal man or woman to remain aware of all the evolutions of the media and to study firsthand all the tendencies, all the schools, all the genres. The limits one encounters are simply those of human capacities and available time. And it might occur that you, from time to time, you want to read something else than a comic or a manga, another type of book. To make choices means to work on a corpus of reference. You meet inevitably the question of how representative your corpus is and where you have to end it. It is a question that is easy to answer if you work on a topic that is naturally delimited, a topic that concerns by definition a given corpus. You can, for instance, be interested in the feeling of power in superhero comics, in the theme of childhood memories in autobiographical comics, or in the aesthetics of black and white in contemporary graphic novels. But the question of the corpus becomes much more complex when your ambition is to build a general theory of comics, or when you want to deal with the art of comics or the comics phenomenon as a whole. In the past, some French scholars rejected, without laughing, the superhero comic books as being no true comics. Others wrote that a comic had to be epic, adventurous, and that humor comics had nothing to do with the very definition of the media, but belonged to the tradition of caricature. And all of them ignored the manga in all good conscience. Nowadays, one can't imagine such exclusions anymore. But how can you treat, as an undifferentiated whole, a media that admits so many different formats and channels? Newspaper comics, standard comic books, hardbound albums, as we say in France, pocket editions, screen of your computer or your mobile phone. How can you apply the same frames of analysis to the industrial production, marketed to entertain the largest possible audience, and to alternative, experimental, avant-garde works with a very small circulation? And finally, how do you verify that a theory grounded on the in-depth study of a limited number of examples can be rightfully extrapolated to the complete body of works conceived in various cultural areas with significant differences between them? I am confronted to this last question with the theoretical propositions I make in my essay Système de la bande dessinée. This book, which was originally a part of my thesis, my PhD, was published in France in 1999, just 10 years ago. It has been translated in the United States by the University Press of Mississippi in 2007 and has just been released, as you mentioned, in Japan by Seidosha. As far as I know, it's the first essay about comics written by a European scholar that is available on these 3 continents. It makes me very proud, but at the same time, a little apprehensive. The American translation has already enlightened a few terminological problems. To mention just one of them. The American tradition places the daily strip and the Sunday page in contrast as two different formats. Whereas in France, the word strip designates any of the tiers or stripes that make up the page in an average layout. The page is thus made of 3 or 4 superposed strips, so that the panel is a subunity of the strip and the strip a subunity of the page. It is in that sense that I have continuously used the word strip in my essay, and even though the word is borrowed from the English language, it is a source of confusion for American readers, I could notice. My most recent work raises the same kind of difficulty. Indeed, the topic of my next essay, to be published in a few months, is parody in the comics. I realize that in the Anglo-Saxon world, the concept of parody is used in a much broader meaning than in France. If you read, for instance, Linda Hutchion's authoritative book, A Theory of Parody, this book was published in 2000 by University of Illinois Press. You will observe that she does not establish any clear difference between what she calls parody and what we, French scholars, name more generally intertextuality. As soon as a work of art or a fiction refers to a former work or fiction, whatever the nature of this reference might be, Hutchion identifies this link as a case of parody. She writes, for example, that modern writers like Borges, Robbe-Grillet or Nabokov used in their works parodic versions of the structures of the detective novel. For the French-speaking community, parody is not separable from the idea of mockery and satire. It consists in an imitation of a pre-existing work, which transforms it in a satirical or comical way. Thus, if my essay is to be translated in English one day, to maintain the term of parody will inevitably be a source of misunderstanding. The best equivalent of the concept of parody in the French acceptation is probably the term lampoon. No doubt that the translation and the reception of my system of comics in Japan will meet the same kind of terminological and conceptual problems. But I am unable to anticipate them, and I will only discover them through the reviews that will be devoted to my book, insofar that someone will be so kind as to translating them for me. And I want to thank my translator who is in the room, Kensuke Noda. Where are you? Somewhere.